If you could look into the eyes of a serial killer right at the final moment before the lethal injection, what do you think you'd see? Regret or emptiness? Or maybe a look that feels eerily familiar to your own? In the United States, there have been more than 3,500 serial killings since 1976. Some of those killers were executed after final steak dinner offering an apology, or quietly humming a hymn. Others spent decades behind bars sketching the faces of their victims, purely from memory. Who were they? This is not just a story of crimes. It is about why they lived and why they died. This is a close-up journey into 10 of the most brutal serial killers in America. Before we begin, leave a comment. Which country or state are you watching from? Let's see how far these stories have traveled. First, William Bonin. A battered Ford van rolled down California highways on cold nights in the late 1970s. It weaved through rest stops, places once visited by hopeful teenagers. William Bonin, with a confident smile, welcomed them inside, not to connect, but to lure them into a journey with no return. From a distance, streetlights reflected off the silver paint. Young feet stepped in, unaware it would be the last time they'd see light. Bonin, who later admitted to killing at least 21 teenage boys, was convicted in 14 separate cases. Each approach followed a chilling routine, stopping at gas stations, offering a ride, locking the doors. He tightened the plan with tools to restrain the victims. In some instances, he was not alone. Authorities later discovered the victims in public areas across California like never before. For over a year, the victims surfaced miles apart, each scene sharing haunting similarities. Detectives began to realize this wasn't random. It was systematic. Finally, on June 11, 1980, an undercover team tracked Bonin's van. When it stopped near Hollywood, they heard a faint cry from the back. That was the final sound they needed. When officers opened the door, they found a 17-year-old boy, found in distress, eyes frozen in terror. A search of the van revealed a trove of evidence: ropes, restraints, and newspaper clippings of the very murders he had committed. Bonin was arrested on the spot and later linked to a string of unsolved cases. In court, Bonin remained calm. Grieving parents stared at him, hoping to see remorse, but his eyes stayed blank. The evidence was stark: hair samples, blood traces, and witness statements from his accomplices. The court handed down 2 death sentences in 1982, one in Los Angeles and one in Orange County. Nearly 14 years later, on the night of February 22, 1996, Bonin requested a final meal: sausage pizza, coffee ice cream, and Coca-Cola. He watched Jeopardy! On television and chatted casually with the warden. At the final moment, he said, "I think that if someone has a dangerous thought in their mind, they should find a quiet place and reflect." No apologies, no tears. At exactly 12:13 a.m., on February 23, 1996, William Bonin became the first person in California to be executed by lethal injection. His eyes, just before closing, remained unchanged, calm, almost indifferent. He once wrote, "If you're going to do it, plan ahead and pick the place to leave the body before you pick the victim." That message did not save him, but it remains chilling, a reminder that sometimes evil doesn't come from madness, but from planning. Second, Richard Ramirez. In the darkness of Los Angeles in the late 1980s, people began locking their windows tight and drifting to sleep under yellow streetlights. A gaunt figure with a haggard face and yellowed teeth wandered alone through quiet alleyways. He chose the moments when people were drowsy, slipped into unlocked homes, armed with anything he could carry. He became a living horror. The Night Stalker. From April 1984 to August 1985, Richard Ramirez, once a young cocaine dealer, unleashed a wave of terror during the late-night hours. He invaded homes, resulting in fatalities and serious injuries. He also broke in and stole, turning burglary into chaotic nightmares. Each attack differed, The unpredictability left the community shaken. He was so hard to predict, one investigator later recalled. One night in early June 1985, Ramirez illegally entered a Monterey Park home, where a tragic incident resulted in the death of a local pizzeria owner and injury to his wife. In the aftermath, he left behind cryptic markings and a shoe print, key clues that helped investigators connect him to other cases. Police did not know his face until they released a mugshot from a previous arrest. On the morning of August 31, 1985, Ramirez walked into a store in East Los Angeles. Locals recognized the Night Stalker from news reports. A crowd subdued him until police arrived. It was not just an arrest, it was justice delivered by the community. The trial lasted months. At the Los Angeles courthouse in July 1988, Ramirez appeared in court, raised his hand bearing a pentagram, and made a shocking gesture in court. He pleaded guilty to everything: 13 murders, 5 attempted murders, 11 sexual assaults, 14 count of burglary. In September 1989, the jury convicted him on all counts. In November 1989, he was sentenced to death in the gas chamber, 13 death sentences. For the next 23 years, Ramirez lived on death row at San Quentin, showing no remorse. He even courted a pen pal who became his wife, author Doreen Leoy, and uttered a chilling phrase: "Big deal. Death comes with the territory. See you in Disneyland." He became more than a criminal. He turned into a dark symbol that gripped Los Angeles in fear. Until the morning of June 7, 2013, Ramirez did not die by execution. He died from B-cell lymphoma at the San Quentin Hospital, aged 53. No clear final words were heard. Just the official report: died of natural causes. Some felt relief. Others wanted a public execution to close the story once and for all. Richard Ramirez left no apologies, only a haunting assertion that he existed beyond good and evil, believing he was above all rules. The terror he sowed did not come from specific acts alone, but from his utter disregard for societal norms. Third, Glen Rogers, Los Angeles, 1995. In a dimly lit bar, a tall, polite man approached women, inviting them out with a look half alluring, half hiding a darker purpose. He was called the Casanova Killer for his dating tactics, and later the cross-country killer, because his crimes spanned across the United States. He met Tina Marie Cribbs, 34, a mother of 2, and entered her tragic story. Tina disappeared after a night out with him. Days later, police found her dead in an East Tampa motel room, found deceased. Rogers had left her car behind and fled. When crime scene evidence and shoe prints were analyzed, investigators tracked Rogers to Kentucky. A fast-paced car chase ended with his arrest. Driving Tina's car, hair disheveled, face pale. From there, the case led to sexual assault and murder charges against women in multiple states. In 1997, Rogers faced trial in Tampa. Shocking evidence like hair samples, clothing, and crime scene details led to a death sentence for the assault and murder of Tina Cribbs. A second death sentence followed in California for killing Sandra Gallagher, a woman he met in a Van Nuys bar and later murdered. Rogers once claimed he had killed about 70 women, then retracted the claim, though authorities never found enough evidence. In prison, he did not stay silent. His time on death row in Florida saw appeals, victims' families in anguish, and public shock when he revealed he had been abused as a child. A detail considered for a lighter sentence but ultimately rejected. Finally, on May 15, 2025, Glen Rogers walked onto the execution gurney at Florida State Prison, becoming the 5th inmate executed in the state that year. Before he died, he requested a final meal of pizza, chocolate cake, and a can of soda. The warden reported that he ate slowly, as if each bite carried the weight of a life no one wanted to repeat. In his final moments, he spoke 2 controversial lines. "Thanks to my wife. In the future, you will be answered. President Trump, keep making America great. I am ready." It sounded like a political statement. Yet, it ignited public outrage. It was the last echo from a man who once spread terror. Victims' families, like Linda Price, who was saved when Rogers drove using her oxygen tank, shared a collective sigh of relief, feeling justice had been served. For nearly 30 years, investigators never confirmed his full victim list. Some rumors linked him to Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman, but the LAPD confirmed no real connection. The horror of Glen Rogers was patternless. He did not rely on sudden violence, but rather a quiet, cunning allure that drew victims in. Women stepped into his Dodge Caravan and into oblivion. Even after his death, he left behind a message that was cold and cryptic. You will be answered. Fourth, Derrick Dearman. Late at night in Citronelle, Alabama, in late August 2016. Beneath the dim glow of a house deep in the woods, 5 people slept peacefully, including 2 couples and a pregnant woman. Derrick Dearman, once close to them, quietly broke in. He had gone days without sleep, using methamphetamine, and later claimed that voices inside pushed him to act, in that still familiar silence. 5 people died. Derrick Dearman used a weapon to kill 5 people, including the pregnant woman, sending shockwaves through the community. This was not just drug-fueled chaos, it was calculated, deliberate brutality. The next morning, Lynetta Lester, Dearman's ex-girlfriend, woke up next to her cousin and other family members, now dead. She and her 3-month-old baby had been kidnapped but were later released at his father's home in Mississippi. When Derrick sobered up, he turned himself in at a nearby police station and confessed. When asked if he understood what it meant to say goodbye to life, he replied, "I know I'm responsible." In September 2018, a court in Mobile, Alabama, found him guilty of 6 counts of capital murder, including the unborn child, and 2 counts of kidnapping. The public was divided. Some felt the death penalty was justice. Others pointed to his mental health, major depression, bipolar disorder, PTSD, but the jury delivered a death sentence. Derrick played an active role in his trial. He withdrew his appeals and accepted execution. He wrote, "I committed the crime. It's not fair to the victims to keep dragging this out." Governor Kay Ivey approved the execution order, calling it the most appropriate path to justice for the victims' families. On October 17, 2024, Derrick stepped onto the lethal injection gurney at Holman Prison in Alabama, the 5th execution in the state that year. Before that moment, he chose a final meal, a seafood platter with fried catfish, boiled shrimp, clams, and 2 sides provided by a local restaurant. He also met with his child, parents, and family members to say goodbye. At approximately 6:14 p.m., Derrick was pronounced dead. Moments earlier, inside the chamber, he addressed the victims' families. "Please forgive me. This is not for me. It's for you." Then turned to his loved ones. "Y'all know I love y'all." A soft tear stained the pillow. As the drugs flowed, he remained quiet, passing away peacefully after a chain of violent choices. In that final moment, Derrick Dearman acknowledged the pain he had caused, and that his death might offer some fraction of restitution. It was not deep remorse, but it was a human apology, whether or not that can ever be enough for 5 lost lives. Derrick Dearman stands as an image of a man driven to violence by drugs, but who fully accepted his sentence. A journey marked by terror, accountability, and a haunting absence of full forgiveness. 5th, Garcia Glen White. Houston, late 1989. In a small apartment on a suburban street, 38-year-old single mother Benita Edwards celebrated her twin daughter's 16th birthday. Annette and Burnett were smiling. Joy filled the room, until silence lingered for 2 days and police knocked. What they found inside left the officers speechless. The family lay still, never to return to life. Garcia Glen White, a former college football player, had turned to crack cocaine after his athletic days. Friends said he often visited Edwards' apartment to use drugs with her. On November 30th, 1989, a heated argument broke out. White killed Bonita. When her daughters came to check on her, he attacked them too. All 3 victims showed signs of assault, a shock that rippled through Houston. For years, the murders went unsolved, a cold case. Then, in July 1995, White was arrested for armed robbery at a corner store, where the store owner was killed. Investigators gathered testimony from his accomplice. At first, White denied involvement, but confronted with his friend's statements, he confessed to killing the Edwards family. DNA from the scene matched him completely. He also admitted to 5 murders in total, including Greta Williams and the store owner, but was only charged in the Edwards case. In July 1996, a jury found him guilty of 3 capital murders, 2 assaults, and 2 burglaries. He was sentenced to death. Since then, he remained on death row in Texas, nearly 30 years behind bars. Before execution, White was served the standard inmate meal. No special requests. Since 2011, Texas no longer offers final meal privileges. No favorites, no choices. Only the appointed hour. On October 1st, 2024, Texas administered lethal injection at Huntsville Prison. Before the injection, White was asked for final words. He said, "I am sorry for all the wrong I've done and the pain I've caused." Then he began singing a soft hymn, "I Trust in God." His voice trembled, shifting between low and high notes, a haunting, sorrowful sound. As the final procedure began, he remained calm. The announcement came shortly after, marking the end of his sentence. His name was Garcia Glen White, a man who, unlike most on death row, expressed a willingness to pay for the lives he had taken. With an apology and a song, public opinion split. Some found peace knowing the girls had received justice. Others asked, "Did it take too long? Almost 30 years?" A family representative said, "3 lives were taken. At least now, we've seen an ending." In the shadow of conviction and the light of the death chamber, White's story wasn't just about lives stolen. It marked a prolonged cycle of grief, a quiet ending to a long-awaited legal burden. 6th, Samuel Little. In 2012, at a homeless shelter in Kentucky, police arrested a 72-year-old man with an oxygen tank, suspecting him of drug use. They had no idea that this man, Samuel Little, was hiding one of the most terrifying crime mysteries in American history. That year, Little was extradited to California, where DNA linked him to 3 unsolved cases from the late 1980s. When a judge sentenced him to life in prison in 2014, no one imagined that, just a few years later, the FBI would call him the most prolific serial killer in United States history. With 60 confirmed murders and 93 confessed. Over nearly 2 years and more than 700 hours of interviews, Texas Ranger James Holland carefully unlocked Little's memories. He confessed with chilling detail, "I killed her near a little bridge with 3 arches. I killed her in a narrow alley in Miami." He described the color of streetlight leaves, details vivid enough to help solve dozens of cold cases that had gone unanswered for decades. In prison, Little chose not to stay silent. The FBI gave him paper and pencils, and he began sketching his victims' portraits, 26 of which were released publicly. Some of these drawings helped solve old cases and identify the forgotten. Yet, Little never asked for a reduced sentence or special privileges. He only expressed one wish: that people remember the women, not him. His 2014 trial had no plea deals. He received 4 consecutive life sentences without parole for the first 3 murders, and additional sentences later in Texas and Florida after confessing to more during 2018 and 2019. Most of Little's time in prison was spent at California State Prison, where he might have been the only inmate using art to resurrect the lost. His drawings served as a form of remembrance, preserving the faces, names, and pain of victims long overlooked. Most were vulnerable women, the homeless, drug users, sex workers. In one interview, he said, "I know I upset people, but I targeted those the world forgot. I'm just telling their stories. Samuel Little died on December 30th, 2020, from illness at a prison hospital. He left no final words, no farewell rituals, only a quiet ending, like so many of his victims who vanished into silence. His story is a tragic reminder. Lives once deemed worthless by society were reclaimed, through evidence, memory, art, and finally, identity. He left no remorse, only a living archive, sketches and confessions, holding the weight of 93 souls. 7th, Gary Ridgway. In 1982 in Kent, Washington, the body of a young woman was discovered in the Green River. She was one of the first victims in a pattern that would stretch across 2 decades. No one knew that this quiet stretch of water would become a symbol of fear, marking the beginning of the Green River Killer's reign. Gary Leon Ridgway was a skilled truck painter who lived a quiet life on the outside, a father, a husband, and a reliable co-worker. But behind that facade was a serial killer, cold, detached, and terrifyingly methodical. Between 1982 and 1998, Ridgway admitted to killing at least 49 women. The real number may be between 71 and 90. Most of his victims were vulnerable: sex workers, homeless women, or hitchhikers. He lured them into his truck, then took their lives through strangulation, a silent method, leaving little trace. Victims were often dumped in the Green River or buried in scattered locations. Early on, police struggled to connect the cases. The victim profiles varied. Locations spanned wide areas, and crime scenes lacked consistency. But in 2001, Ridgway became a suspect after DNA was recovered from his truck. A full review of 2 decades of evidence followed. On November 30th, 2001, police in Lakewood approached him after confirming a match with 2 victims from Mercer Island. He was arrested at home, a swift end to 19 years of investigation. The trial in 2003 at King County was brief. In exchange for avoiding the death penalty, Ridgway pleaded guilty to 48 murders, each a loss that could never be undone. This deal allowed authorities to locate more victims. In November 2003, he received 49 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. He would never see the sun again, except through prison bars. Ridgway was transferred to the federal prison in Walla Walla, where he now lives day by day, a gray existence within gray walls. He does jigsaw puzzles, reads history books, and occasionally agrees to speak with police searching for more victims. "I just want to pay for what I did," he once said, in a low voice, as if speaking from somewhere distant inside. Before his final transfer, Ridgway was served the standard prison meal. No special requests. A typical tray: sliced chicken, mashed potatoes, boiled vegetables, and bread. No emotion, no changes, just routine. In a rare public interview, Ridgway offered a few cold words. "I know people want me dead, but I think life without parole isn't the worst hell." Gary Ridgway's life ends in silence. No pleas, no spectacle. He did not die in body, but each day in solitary is a death of time. A timeline dragging him deeper into a darkness with no escape. 8. Patrick Kearney. In 1971, across Southern California highways, young men began vanishing without a trace. Within police databases, their cases sparked a haunting blend of confusion and fear. Patrick Wayne Kearney, an electronics engineer living a quiet life in Redondo Beach, hid a chilling truth. He would later be known as the Trash Bag Killer. Kearney confessed to at least 21 murders, most of them teenage boys and young men ages 13 to 28, targeting victims around Los Angeles, San Diego, and Riverside between 1962 and 1977. He believed the real count might reach 43. His weapon of choice was often a small-caliber handgun, .22 Derringer. Kearney lured victims through hitchhiking, then ended their lives swiftly. Sometimes he disposed of the victims in isolated areas, prompting a major investigation. His method was simple, quiet, and mathematically brutal. Victims were discarded along remote highways. making it hard to link one crime to another. But in the spring of 1977, the disappearance of 17-year-old John LeMay drew police attention. LeMay was found near Angeles Crest Highway. Hair and fiber evidence linked the scene to Kearney, prompting LAPD and Riverside detectives to close in. He was arrested on July 1, 1977, at the Riverside Police Department after disappearing with a friend, David Hill. Hill, later cleared of any involvement, was released. In custody, Kearney admitted to 21 murders and hinted the number could be higher in exchange for avoiding the death penalty. At trial in 1978, he received 21 life sentences without parole, to be served consecutively. As of 2022, he remains incarcerated at Mule Creek State Prison in California. In prison, Kearney has not remained silent. He helped police locate burial sites, drew maps of dump spots, and even agreed to interviews from behind bars. In one chilling statement, he said, "They should have gotten a few of my pictures from the evidence room. Movies showing disturbing acts I filmed." A terrifying comment, but no sign of remorse. Investigators described his demeanor as mechanical, like standing in front of a machine, not a man. Victims' families repeatedly petitioned against any future appeal attempts, calling him an insult to humanity. 9th. Edmund Kemper, Santa Cruz, California. 1972. Trucks rumbled down the highway. Dorm room lights flickered in the fog. Among them was a towering figure nearly 7 feet tall, Edmund Emil Kemper III. He stood out, but no one knew he was the co-ed killer. He displayed troubling behavior from a young age, raising concerns about his mental state. He stared coldly at his mother, the person he most resented. At age 15, he shot and killed his grandparents, then calmly called the police. He was institutionalized but released at age 21, returning to live with his mother. Within just 11 months, from 1972 to 73, Kemper killed 6 female college students, ages 15 to 19. He picked them up while hitchhiking, ended their lives through violent means, and brought them home, not for burial, but for reasons only he could explain. What investigators later discovered in his home sent waves of horror across the country. He later murdered his mother and her best friend, then drove 1,600 kilometers to Colorado and turned himself in. When arrested on April 24, 1973, Kemper remained calm. He described everything with chilling clarity. "I wanted to have them, as part of me." He stood trial in October 1973. Despite his plea of insanity, the jury ruled he understood every choice he made. Kemper asked for the death penalty, but California had halted executions at the time. He received 8 consecutive life sentences and mandatory psychiatric treatment. Since 1973, Kemper has been held at California Medical Facility in Vacaville, where he became known for his intelligence, IQ over 145, and psychological insight. He volunteered for a prison program, recording more than 5,000 hours of audiobooks for the blind. He once said, "Reading books for others helps me feel like I'm not completely evil." But beneath the charity lies a soul beyond saving. He contributed to FBI profiling research and warned, "There's someone out there thinking of killing. They need to say it. Find someone who'll listen." Kemper declined parole hearings multiple times, stating, "Society isn't ready for me." His final waiver of parole review was in 2002, and he has been repeatedly denied since, including early 2024. Edmund Kemper's story does not end in flames or spectacle. He is still alive, reading for those who cannot see, existing in silence. Yet, behind every recorded word, there echoes a past shaped by tragedy and loss. One question lingers. Can a man who once used force to possess life ever use words to save one? 10th. Ronald Dominique. In Louisiana, during the late 1990s, the bodies of young men began to surface, abandoned near levees, among mangrove trees, and in quiet marshes. Most were homeless or struggling with addiction. In these places where voices fade, their last breath vanished into silence. The man behind this terror was Ronald Joseph Dominique, born in 1964. A small, quiet man living in Bayou Blue, working as an electricity inspector. He left no impression in public, but for his victims, he was the embodiment of death. From 1997 to 2006, Dominique confessed to killing at least 23 men, aged 16 to 46, most of them African American. He lured them into his vehicle, sometimes bragging about a girlfriend, offering drugs, alcohol, or just a place to sleep. They trusted him. They never came back. Their some victims were discovered in remote locations and appeared restrained. The press named him the Bayou Strangler. The investigation lasted years. A collaboration between local police and the FBI. There were no witnesses, no statements. Until November 2006, when a churchgoer named Ricky Wallace came forward. He claimed Dominique lured him into a trailer, demanded bondage under strange conditions, and he barely escaped with his life. Police took a DNA sample from Dominique. It matched evidence from 3 victims: Oliver LeBancs, Manuel Reed, and Mitchell Johnson. On December 1, 2006, Dominique was arrested at a shelter for the homeless. When questioned, he admitted, "I always knew I'd get caught," and described each murder like reading from a script, as if every case had its own twisted plotline. In September 2008, Dominique accepted a plea deal to avoid the death penalty. He received 8 consecutive life sentences without parole. According to multiple sources, the victims' families agreed. They preferred closure over prolonged trials. Since then, Dominique has lived at Louisiana State Penitentiary, Angola. No songs, no political rants, just silence behind steel bars. He occasionally meets with prison counselors, but there are no signs of remorse, only quiet acceptance of a harsh routine. One detective once said, "He didn't scream, he didn't beg. He answered like he was talking about the weather." And so the question remains, what is his true image? A brutal predator? Or just a lonely man who knew he was broken but stayed silent? Ronald Dominique did not leave a dramatic ending. He left behind 23 people who never made it home, a sentence that will last his lifetime, and a region of South Louisiana that will never forget the name Bayou Strangler. 10 individuals. 10 stories. Not of the killers, but of the pain they left behind. Behind every sentence, every prison cell, and every injection are shattered families. Mothers without children. Children growing up in the dark. Some killers planned with cold precision. Others confessed and took responsibility. But does truth or justice ever truly feel like enough? We do not tell these stories to glorify evil. We tell them to remember, to honor the lives swept away in silence. If you believe justice begins not with law, but with awareness, with one click that makes a difference, like, subscribe, and share this video. And don't forget to leave a comment below. What do you think could truly stop tragedies like these from happening again? Let your voice be part of a long overdue prayer for souls that have been quiet for far too long.